All right, welcome into the Render Podcast. I am Cam, and I'm here with Kaylee and Brooke.
Hello.
We're going to be talking all about the state of events. What are things happening? What are we seeing happen with our clients and clients all over the world? And so we're just going to dive into what that looks like and what we're kind of seeing coming down the pipeline as far as events go.
Yeah, I am so excited that we're talking about this because I probably get this question from our clients, if not once a day, like 5 times a week. And so I feel like if our clients are asking it repetitively, your clients are probably asking you, or you're asking Google what's happening. And it can be confusing, kind of like looking into where we're headed. So
what kind of questions, just to start out, are you hearing our clients ask? Because they're probably similar to our online listeners.
I'm hearing a lot of our corporate clients who are not necessarily in the Dallas market asking us, hey, like, how is it going in Dallas? What are the restrictions? Are people booking events? Are people hosting events? Like, are people attending events? And as someone who is working with a lot of different clients, I have the ability to answer those questions for our clients and kind of redirect them to confidence instead of fear of like, I don't know if I'm making a good decision by hosting this event. Mm-hmm. That's a common question. Another one is, what's your COVID policy with the Delta variant rising? Like, what does that look like if I book? And so we're going to kind of run through a lot of those questions in this episode, but we're also going to talk through kind of what we're seeing, not just in our market, but also what we're seeing multiple markets. But we're really going to rely heavily on our market and our experience, because by no means we are not experts in COVID. Like, we don't call us for restrictions or anything, because we are just trying to figure it out like you are. And so we just want to preface that, again, we are not experts in COVID. We are experts in the event industry. And so we are just going to kind of share what we're learning, what we're working through, and how we're kind of navigating this season, this long season.
Yet it is a season.
Yes.
It will be over.
One day
a new normal.
Soon. Yeah, will be better for it. Yeah.
Well, let's start off with some common event themes that we have seen so far. So we've been seeing some large-scale corporate events being canceled, not all of them. We have also seen a lot of corporate events continuing to go on. We recently did a corporate event for Michelob Ultra, and they had it all outdoors, so that's definitely an option for corporate.
Yeah, and I think what is really cool about, we saw at the very beginning of the pandemic, like, pretty much all of our corporate clients hit the brakes. Like, whoa, we don't want to be liable for any of this. Like, we don't know what we're going to do.
Really all events, weddings too, and social. Everyone was pumping the brakes. If you were a bride in 2020, you know that full well.
Yeah, like, you just didn't know what to do, which fortunately we're kind of getting into a season where there's more expectations on restrictions and how to navigate, like, a contingency plan and all of that. But I think what's really encouraging for me, and I think for a lot of our clients, is a lot of things are opening back up. Like, college football started last week, and there was packed fans. All of the stands were full. ACL is happening in 2 weeks. Lollapalooza got canceled, but not because of COVID. It got canceled because of weather. And so a lot of things. It's been a while
since we've heard of weather cancellation.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of things that are happening, and I get the headlines, and it's like, cancellation, not because of COVID.
Right.
And I actually saw something online the other day from a website, The Vendory was putting it out. They basically said that they found this statistic that it's actually safer for you to go to live events than it is to shop. So we're going to link that article in the show notes so that you can read up on it. But I found that very interesting. I was like, okay, again, there's a lot of different ranges on where you can fall, but people are moving and shaking again.
Yeah. That was another thing that we had, was brand activations are really hot in our market. Yes. Michelob Ultra is considered a brand activation. So, those are small scale and large scale, but those are doing really well in Dallas.
Yeah, and just to remind our listeners what a brand activation
Yes.
It is it can be, like you said, it can be a small scale, intimate gathering of influencers and like specific targeted audience for a brand. But it is going to be more of an experience. It's going to have a lot of different impactful brand elements. And so it doesn't fall under like a conference or like a social gathering. It is truly a brand activation. So a brand is activating their brand in a live in-person event for people to come and interact with their brand.
And that could be
They're
for
my favorite, by the way.
their brand, or it could be for a new product that brand is rolling
Launching.
out. Yeah, a whole lot of different things that you can do within brand activations.
Yeah, but they are like
They're fun.
hot.
Really hot.
Yeah, they're hot.
Think
right
like Instagrammable moments. Like, how can you get your influencers or celebrities or whoever is there to Instagram about it, share it with their friends? That's what a brand activation is.
Yeah.
So for rentals, it's great.
Absolutely. And it's definitely a marketing effort for a brand. It has become a line item for a lot of marketing budgets. Instead of doing like a mailer or sending out a catalog, they're doing these activations and they're seeing a lot of success with them. So
And it's separate from their events budget. So they still have events budgets to host their events, but this is a marketing budget spend. So when it comes to corporate, you're not taking away from their annual events budget, which is great.
Yeah. Over the last 2 years, I feel like everyone has relied on online marketing to get their brand out there, and it makes perfect sense why people are still wanting to keep up with the brand activations, because everyone's online.
Yeah.
If they're not there in person, they're online. So weddings are still happening. They're just, some are at a smaller capacity. We've seen tons of brides that do the little drive-bys, or we've had brides that Zoom in, have some families Zoom in, but I think for the most part, weddings are getting kind of back to their regular scale. Cam had a sister-in-law.
Yep, sister-in-law and brother. Yeah, and they have 300 people at the wedding.
Yeah.
So weddings are still happening as they used to happen, and there are some smaller options that we didn't really consider pre-COVID.
Yeah, for sure.
Mini monies, I think they call them.
Yes.
A mini moni.
Yeah.
Cute.
It's so cute. I'm like, it's so intimate and thoughtful. I love them.
Yeah.
So large events are still not at the capacity that they were at in 2019, and they may not be again until 2023. So this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but some research that I found said that when we say large events, I think we're talking like really big,
like in the
thousands range. Might not come back till 2023, but like you said, football games are happening, so that could be, we don't know.
I think
no one
Again,
knows.
we are not the experts here. Things could open up 100% everywhere tomorrow. I mean, we don't know. So this is just what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think I've seen I think the more other industries are moving back into normalcy of like football and entertainment and all of this, like we're going to see the event industry kind of model because we are we are the source for in-person gatherings and connection and getting all of that together, and people miss that. I mean, whether you are still super nervous about COVID or not, like you miss human connection. And so I've seen a lot of large-scale conferences, and like Broadway, for example, I think in New York, they're requiring that you show your vaccine card and you also have to wear a mask the whole time. And so a lot of companies are implementing these policies of like vaccine, or if you're not vaccinated, to get a test to come, like prove that you can come. So there's a lot of workarounds for kind of getting people back in person. And so I think the more that we see other industries doing that, the more we're going to see corporate clients kind of moving back into setting some normalcies with conferences and those big parties and stuff like that.
I mean, I'd rather them be happening and have some restrictions to be able to attend than not happening at all.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely a positive for our industry. And then lastly, this is a pretty obvious one, but some events that we have been seeing are virtual events. You've probably seen a conference that used to be in person and now it's online. So that's been a big theme. And then also hybrid events. We've heard that might become kind of the new normal for some states. And basically what a hybrid event is an in-person gathering where they offer a virtual option. So if you're not comfortable coming in person, you can see the event online.
Mhm.
But overall, that's kind of the common themes that we've seen in the industry.
Yeah.
So a question I wanted to ask you guys is, how has the pandemic affected our in-person event strategy? So what are we doing as a company kind of moving forward?
Yeah.
I'll talk about as far as our team goes and how we handle not only our people, but also our product as well. We have, and it's kind of always been a rule before COVID, is if you're not feeling good, stay home until you're feeling good. Now we are wanting you to get a COVID test just to make sure. We know that not all sickness is just COVID related. There's a lot of other sickness out there. And so regardless, if you're not feeling great, don't come into the office, work from home. We just don't want someone, whether you have COVID or flu or food poisoning or, whatever you have, we just want to be sure that we're protecting our team.
Yeah.
So that's how we're protecting our team. We do require that our team on site at events, especially indoor events, are wearing masks just to stay above reproach. We don't know what sicknesses are out there, whether it's COVID or not. And so we want to just make sure that in a pandemic that we're in right now, that we're just being safe and keeping other people safe too, other vendors, other guests. If we're going to a hotel, there are hotel guests and hotel staff that are there as well. And so we just want to be safe for everyone.
Yeah, and I think it also just reassures our clients that, hey, wherever you're at on this whole mask thing, we just want to be sure that you know that we are being cautious and we are being attentive to the situation, and we want to show them up front that, hey, like, we're taking care of you by wearing this, we're taking care of our team. And again, like you said, being above reproach, but really it's for our clients and it's for our team.
Exactly. And here at the office, it's recommended that you wear a mask. It's not required. And so we want to make sure that everyone feels comfortable where they're at.
Yeah.
We also, if you listened to our episode last week, we talked about work from home strategies and how we're doing that in person and in our own team. So go back and listen to that if you haven't already. And then as far as our inventory, I think it's a good practice anyways to just get into the habit of cleaning your inventory after your events. We're using Lysol, for example, for all of our fabric. And so you might have someone who has a cold even, and they're sitting on your sofa and they're coughing on it while you're getting some germs on that. And so just Lysoling that down. And then any surfaces that we have, whether it's side tables or coffee tables or dining tables or really any surface that we have that's not fabric, we're using Clorox wipes to just wipe that down. Regardless, there's probably at least drink cup rings or there's crumbs or food or something on those tables, so they need to be cleaned anyways. But also implementing that into your fabric as well is really important.
Yeah.
There's one good thing that happened from COVID. It is that everywhere keeps their sinks clean.
Exactly.
There's a lot of things.
It may not have been as big of a priority before COVID, but now it's just a part of our routine.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd say as far as the pandemic and shifting our in-person and event strategies, I mean, this was a lot of conversations that we had to have, like months of just, okay, we made this decision. Wait, hold on.
How are we
Things
still
have
feeling?
changed. Things have changed now. Where are we at? And so
Right.
we had to learn to like get really good at being on our toes, being confident with our clients, but also being okay with saying like, that's a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up. Let me like internally discuss with our team, and let me get back to you, because there was a lot of things that we just did not know, or everything was changing so rapidly that we would have a stance and then it didn't work the next day, or it just wasn't valid anymore. And so we had to get really good at pivoting, adapting, pivoting.
Yes.
And I think with that, our clients really appreciated how we were really authentic with them. We were confident in that we were going to get them an answer. We were going to get them the best solution that we could and just be very real.
Yeah. Listening to your government rules is important too, especially when it comes to the legal stance of things. There's a lot of places that legally you have to abide by certain rules. And so whether you have a stance on something or not, it's just important, especially as a business, to listen to your government agencies, because it could result in fines. It could result in you having to shut your business down, and we would hate that for you. And so no matter what, I feel a certain way about the certain things, and everybody on this team feels a certain way about things. But regardless, it is important to listen to the authorities on certain things, whether you agree with them or not. And so being, if you're on social media, you probably are going to hear about it pretty quickly. But otherwise, even just taking a look once a week or so at your local authorities is just a really good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Listening to your clients. Your clients probably have a different opinion too, and that's okay. But just like listening, and maybe don't change your policies, because you can't change your policies for everyone, but you have a listening ear and you're compassionate and you're like, I understand that this is hard. It's hard for me too, but like, how can we come together and find a solution that works,
Exactly.
As far as events go, like I said, we had to get really good at being creative, like pushing the envelope on creativity, especially in the height of stay-at-home orders and cancellations. And so we had to find new ways to grow our business and do events in a new way. And so we tried to be leaders at figuring out what's going to be next and pushing the envelope. And then also, you have to be really good at thinking tactically and finding solutions for your clients that are tactical and creative, because they want to know that you have solutions too. Like, they're not the only ones that are just like stuck out there trying to figure out what, to do.
Yeah. Or at least give them an option, something that they may not have thought about yet.
Yeah. One thing that you had mentioned earlier was hybrid events. And I found it interesting. I was doing a survey actually from the vendor, like I said earlier, and they kind of had questions that you answered about what 2022 is going to look like. So one of the questions that they asked was basically like, what kind of offerings or features are you going to be considering for your remote attendees that are attending those hybrid events? And I wanted to read off some of the options, because since we're event rentals and we're more of on the design side, we don't normally work with our corporate clients or our wedding clients to work with planning. The logistics are not something that we're typically a part of, but we also get asked questions. And so we like to be a resource for our clients. The options that they listed were offering live streaming of the main event, which is pretty normal. Like, we've seen that a lot with hybrid events, and just virtual events. Totally. They've also are offering a video replay. So that's something, if you are a planner, to consider kind of integrating, where you stream everything. If you don't have the capacity to stream a live event, you could offer a replay. I really like this one, offering exclusive content and experiences for remote attendees. And so sending them some sort of way where they feel like, oh, like, I am still very much a part of the in-person event, but I'm doing it from home or safely or whatever. They also said offering remote Q&As for guests. And so maybe you have a group, if you're doing a conference, maybe you're offering some of your speakers can do Q&As. And then another one is remote friendly networking and connection. And when we were going through planning Rental Biz Summit, when we were thinking about doing it virtually, this was something that we were heavily considering, because the real heart behind Rental Biz Summit was the connection piece and getting people together. And so we were trying to find ways of how can we do that online. And so there's a lot of really cool ways to do that. I think you mentioned Slack and having like a Slack. Do you want to talk about that? That was cool.
Yeah, so I went to a conference, a virtual conference with Create and Cultivate, and they had a Slack channel for all the attendees. And it was really cool because they had, I don't know if you're familiar with Slack, but within Slack, you can create a whole bunch of different channels that are basically different topics. And so within the like overall Slack channel, they had all these different topics that attendees could be in. And so one was like content creation or something like that. And so you could go in there and introduce yourself and kind of connect with some of the other people that were attending the summit. And it was really cool to be a part of that.
You mentioned my brother got married. They had, like, my grandma lives in Missouri, and she didn't want to travel for it because of COVID and such. And so I believe we did like a Facebook Live or something for the ceremony. And so there's ways that you don't necessarily have to bring in a whole nother vendor to be able to stream certain things, but even just having a relative or some family friend just hopping on Facebook Live or FaceTime or things like that. But I have seen other people who will bring in a streaming company that will stream at least the ceremony, because that is a really important part. It's kind of the whole reason why you're having a wedding is for the ceremony.
Oh, the party, come on.
I haven't really seen a lot of people streaming the party and the
probably
reception.
get FOMO if you're not there in person.
I'd get FOMO for sure. But we are seeing some of that happen here locally, but also throughout the world as well. And so you can either pay for someone to come in and do that, or just have a friend or a family member hop on Facebook Live or FaceTime or Zoom or any of the streaming. Gosh, there's so many, I feel like, that you could stream through. But that's an option. But here in a very large metroplex where Texas is pretty much almost open all the way, with not a lot of restrictions, we're kind of seeing the spectrum of all of it. So you might be in a certain place where you're not even allowed to have more than 10-person events at your place. I know in Canada there is a lot more restrictions on in-person events than there are here in Texas, certainly. And so because we have a wider view at what's going on, might be able to help you with your clients.
Yeah, and like to that note, virtual events are going to remain.
They are.
Even whenever we get out of the pandemic, they might be a little bit less than normal, but they were happening before the pandemic. They're going to stay.
Yeah.
And so it's important for you to really start to, if you haven't already, become an expert in that field. And what I mean by that is maybe not necessarily like you start a production company and you buy all this equipment and like you're ready to go, but at least do your research on topics and vocabulary and just different talking points that if you get on the phone with a corporate client who's talking about their virtual event, you can keep up with the conversation and that you can add value to the conversation. For rental companies specifically, one thing that we had been doing before the pandemic, but really started to elevate because of the pandemic, is offering styling and staging. And so I would highly, highly recommend for you to really jump into that market, because there are a lot of virtual events that are snooze fests and could use a little zhuzhing per se, and could really utilize your pieces. And as the one who is offering those pieces, utilize your expertise on having a really nice, well-designed set. And so one of the things that we recommend our team to do, and also if you were to come and talk to us and ask us like, how do I do this, is learning the ins and outs of a production. And so really understanding, okay, if there are going to be 2 cameras, 1 camera, really studying like the frame and the shot so that you can get your design compact enough to fill the space, but also to have extra space so that if the camera, pivots a little bit, they're not getting just a flat wall. They're still getting aspects of the set. Whereas for majority of the filming, it's probably not going to show, but you always want to be prepared for if a director gets creative and is like, oh, I want a different angle, you're ready for that. So really studying all different kinds of virtual setups, and maybe you even connect with a production studio in your local market and kind of have conversations. Take them out to coffee and ask them, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What would you recommend me really learning about the production? Or is there any feedback that you could give me about a set design or things that have worked in the past for you, or pain points that have been frustrating as a production company, because that'll really set you up for success.
Yeah. And really thinking about the virtual option is very different from in person. So if you think about a conference stage design, when you're in person, you can set it up a certain way and it's going to look great because you can see the depth, you can see the different angle points from it. Well, in a lens of a camera, you're not seeing it from the side, you're not seeing it from looking down on something because you're standing, you're seeing it from one lens. And so, for example, we work with If Gathering, and there was, like if we were to do it in person, we'd probably put 2 sofas across from each other in the same angle, not out or anything like that. That's how we would do it in an in-person environment. Well, with a camera view, you're only going to see that side profile of that sofa. And so what we had to do was angle those outwards so you could actually see, one, the people who are sitting on the sofa, but also the details of the sofa as well. And so just thinking about that, and if your design team and your production team are on site at the same time, being able to take a glance in the camera and then go make adjustments and come back to the camera, make adjustments as you go, because it looks so different in a camera lens than it might look even standing 2 inches to the side of the camera. And so really understanding that is really important when it comes to those virtual options.
Yeah, for sure. And if you can't be on site at the same time as your production, I would email them and ask them to tape off where they're going to have the camera so that you can have a taped off like distance so that you can step back, look at that tape and say, okay, this is about the size of the camera. It's going to be this wide. I can step back and I can view it from that angle if you're not necessarily there with the camera in person.
Yes.
Another thing while we're talking about staging and styling is, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I remember now. Okay, another thing while we're talking about staging and styling is just remember that people are still weary of being super close to each other. And so if you're having multiple speakers, go ahead and consider that you're going to need to add additional seating between people. I was helping with the design for a conference coming up and designed this super cute stage, super trendy, was super excited about it. And one of the planners had kind of mentioned, she was like, well, I think we're going to have a little bit more distance between the speakers. And with working with so many different clients, just whenever people started coming back with events, I just kind of got into my rhythm of this is how the conference is going to go. This is what it's going to look like, and kind of pulled back to 2019. And I realized, oh yeah, we're still in the middle of the pandemic and people still need space. And so thinking through whether it's a set design for a virtual event or if it's an in-person, there's likely still, we are all kind of conditioned now to automatically add a buffer.
Yeah.
So just go ahead and build that into your design. And if you get on site and you have a conversation with the planner, or if you are the planner and someone says, hey, we don't need that much space, then you can adjust.
Right.
But kind of think through all of those options.
Or even have it as a pre-question before you put together your renderings, before you put together everything. Ask them what their comfort level is on that stuff.
Yes, that is definitely something I'm going to be asking now, because I was like, oh, yes, you're right. Stools it is.
Yeah, the chairs are bulky and it's hard to fit like 4 chairs up on a stage if they need to be 6 feet apart or whatever.
Right.
Well, and thinking ahead, I mean, if you are a rental company and you do a lot of stage stuff, but you're accustomed to using sofas for your stage set designs, you might consider getting some chairs instead and thinking about the width of your chairs in addition to the actual chair itself, and having plenty of those. So not just limiting it at 2 or 4, but even going into the 8s, 10s, 12s for your armchairs.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I wanted to touch on with virtual events, and this kind of goes less towards our rental friends, but more towards like the planners and the production teams and our clients who are hosting virtual events or hybrid events. One thing that you should really be thinking about when you're producing those is accessibility, and just creating an environment online that is accessible for all. And so having closed captioning, not only is closed captioning amazing for our friends who are deaf, but also I actually read that it can help pull SEO data from your videos, which is really helpful. And so having closed captioning, having things accessible for people who range on the disability spectrum is going to set you up for success. And it's just going to widen your audience and just really make your audience feel seen and heard and valued. And so that's just something that I think we're going to start seeing a lot more, but it's also something to think about and to start researching so that as you start implementing that, you are set up for success.
Okay, so the other thing that we want to touch on with events is your contracts being up to date. I'm going to guess that pre-March 2020, you didn't have anything in your contract that had anything to do with state of emergency, pandemic language, anything like that. And I would hope by now that you probably have something in your contract that has to do with that type of language. But if you don't, I would highly recommend adding it to your contract. We have a contract template that we'll link in our show notes if you want to grab ours and use it. But I do have to say, anytime we talk about contracts, anytime we sell our contract, is that it is a guideline to the words that you put in your contract. You do need to have someone legally in your city, not even just your state, but your city as well, that will look it over, a small business lawyer to look it over and make sure that it stands up in your city, because different cities have different regulations and guidelines. And so I just have to be very clear. You can buy ours and it will save you a ton of money because lawyers charge hourly. It gets real expensive real fast. And so if you have a template to go off of versus starting from scratch, it's going to save you a lot of time and money on the back end. But please make sure that your contracts are up to date. They clearly understand your cancellation policy, your rescheduling policy, anything that the government might put out. Highly recommend having something in your contract about that if you don't already.
Yeah, and what we've done internally is kind of pulled the little snippet about COVID, anything dealing with COVID and our policies from our contract, and also cancellation, and kind of just have it on a document that when somebody asks us, hey, what's your COVID policy? What's the cancellation policy? Instead of me having to open up our contract and scroll through, I can reference, if you take a look at section 8 of our contract, you'll see that this is the verbiage and this is kind of how we're handling COVID. And that has saved a lot of time. Also, answers our client's question directly instead of just being like, go read the contract, you know?
Right.
So I think that was something that we definitely didn't have state of emergency or pandemic in our contract. And so whenever I remember the day that you were like, oh, I gotta update it.
Yeah,
I gotta update our
we
contract.
gotta update it now.
Like, shoot, we are getting cancellations. We need to go in and just update
Yeah.
all of that. And so, yes, seriously, that has saved us a lot of frustration with our clients. We didn't have a ton of people cancel, thankfully, but a lot of people who backed out before signing a contract. But thankfully, with our contract being so firm and solid, we were able to just say, hey, this is kind of the expectation. This is where we're at. Now how can we, add a credit, or where can we go to where we're not having to refund a ton of money? I think we saved ourselves a lot of frustration and a lot of loss of money by having such a firm contract.
And that's because we have a business lawyer that was able to put that together for us. If you don't have a lawyer that you have put this together for you and you just make it up as you go, or you Google certain terms and take some pre-written thing off the internet and put it in your contract, it's a really slippery slope. And so I really highly recommend, even if you don't buy our contract template and take it to a lawyer, please go see a lawyer and have them look that over. There's been, being part of small business, just know if you are new to small business, at some point you will probably be sued by something, or you will sue somebody else for something. It's just part of business. It's not a scary thing. It's just part of business. And so if you don't have a firm contract that holds that up, you are going to lose every single time in a lawsuit. And so please, if you don't have a lawyer that has looked it over, please go do that. Before pandemic, before we put that language in there, our cancellation policy was for the one-offs, the ones that decided they didn't want to get married anymore, the one-offs that said, we didn't have the attendance that we were expecting for our conference. And so our cancellation policy worked for the every now and thens, but not for the masses. And so all of that to say,
those calls at first was like,
oh no, what do we do? Yeah, we're like, we haven't dealt with this before, but thankfully we had a really solid contract before we had COVID language in there.
Do you want to tell the listeners what our current cancellation policy is?
Yeah, so we currently offer, so let's say somebody books with us, we are not able to refund. It's written into our contract. That's a choice that we've made. It's not that we just can't because of, technology. You can. We just wrote it into our contract. So if somebody books the contract, signs the contract, and sends off the deposit, and then 3 weeks later they find out, hey, we have to pull out or whatever, what we'll do is we will offer the credit. So what we do is we take the order total without the tax, so the subtotal, and we will credit that to their account. And we have set that up for a year from their original date. So what we'll do is in Good Shuffle, we will basically take their previous contract, make sure it's saved to their file, which it already is if it's in Good Shuffle. We will take all of the inventory out of their order, so we can go back to their contract to see what their original order was, so there's no worries there. But that way it just frees up all that inventory for that date, so if somebody else decides to move forward, everything's freed up. And what we'll do is we'll add in a line item that says account credit. It has the terminology of basically something along the lines of your account credit is XYZ, and it is valid from July 24th, 2021 through July 24th, 2022. And then we'll send that off to the client. They'll sign off on that. And then we will just mark in their file on Good Shuffle in the notes that they have an account credit of whatever. That way, if they come back, which I actually just had a client come back who was supposed to get married in 2021. It is 2021. She was supposed to get married in 2020, booked, had to put off her account credit, or had to put off her wedding. So she had an account credit and she just came back and is booked. And so it was super simple for me to go back in, know exactly what her credit was, apply it to her order. One thing that we are doing that I don't think we had thought of until we started getting people ready to use their account credits, but what we do is whenever they get ready to use their account credit, they will sign their new contract and then they pay the initial deposit. That way we are already getting an initial deposit of influx of money. And then as soon as they pay their deposit, I'll go in and add the account credit so that we aren't just saying, oh yeah, just utilize your credit. And then we have to wait another 6 months or 2 weeks or whatever to get an initial payment. And that has really helped us kind of keep cash kind of influx. And so that's basically what our cancellation policy is currently.
Okay, I have one more follow-up question to that. If someone, say, like that situation, booked in 2020 and they went ahead and paid, what happens if we raise our inventory prices? Are they responsible for paying the rest?
So they get a totally new contract.
Okay.
So we don't just activate their old contract. So whenever I cancel out their old inventory items, they are responsible to pay the influx and pay. So essentially, like if something cost $350 last year and we raised it to $375, they're now responsible for the $375.
Yeah.
And their account credit will just cover a little bit less than what is normal. But
it's very similar if you go to Target and you buy a shirt from Target at $25. You return it when you have a store credit Target, and say a year later you go back and the shirt is now $27. You're going to be paying that $27 price. It's just a part of business. It's part of being a company that has inflation that comes with it. So if someone asks or they're upset about it, we just give them the example of, look, unfortunately, there's been a lot of influx in inflation and pricing and wood costs. If you make anything with wood, you know about the wood increase.
It's coming down.
Is it?
It's coming down.
Finally.
Or flowers even.
And flowers,
Listen to this
I mean, really everything, gas prices and really everything is just more expensive right now. And so you have to cover those costs.
Yeah, that's a great question though. Another thing that a lot of people have been asking me is, okay, so how do I market in this season? What does it look like for me to market if I'm not necessarily actually working on events, or if my clients are just kind of questioning? And so one thing that I would encourage you is to stay relevant. First of all, like we talked about earlier, is do your research and know what's happening in your state, in your county, in your little bubble, so that you can be relevant online, but also that you can be relevant to your clients. Because whenever you are staying relevant, your clients notice and they're like, oh, they know. I have confidence. I can trust them. I can trust that they're going to offer solutions, or I can trust that they're up to date on what's happening, and that especially for our clients who do not live in Texas, who are in New York or California, and their market is completely different. I'm getting calls all the time of, what does this look like right now? Are people, like I said earlier, are people attending? What is it? So I can show up with confidence and say, yes, actually we have events. Some people are doing this, some people are doing that. But it's helping them feel confident in that we are the experts here, and that they're not having to just go and Google and figure everything out. And so I'd say stay relevant, be posting events. Maybe if you're not actively working on events right now, find events that go in line with the trend of the day and be posting those, so that you fake it till you make it. And posting the events will inspire other people to have the events. Share about online,
Share about your past events.
Share about your past events, share about what's happening on in the events industry where you're at, so that your clients can see that and feel confident. I'd also be sharing events that you're working on. One thing that we like to do is on our stories is we like to share kind of the behind the scenes of what we're doing, how we are serving our clients. Maybe you are on site and there was a problem and you're like, oh Lord, I gotta figure out this problem. Share that. It might not be something that you would post on your feed, but if you're posting it in your story, it translates as, I'm solving the problem, I'm getting things done. And then show the final product and people will be like, wow, she did that.
Right.
Okay. Or he did that. Like, I know now that they are problem solvers. They were going to figure everything out.
Yeah. Builds trust with your client too.
For sure. One quote I wanted to share really quick while we're talking about marketing is by Richard Black from Superfly. I like that company. No idea what it is, but it sounds cool. Superfly. He says, you build trust by reducing fear. So we integrate it into the creative. And so I think he was referring to essentially, he was talking about a music festival, and they are going to have, what is the bear that does the fires?
Smokey the Bear?
Yes, Smokey the Bear. Thank you. They were saying that Smokey the Bear was going to have a mask on when people walked up. And so it kind of already indicated like, oh, this is a creative way to show mask, like wear a mask.
Yeah.
I've also seen people doing really creative things with hand sanitizer and having really cool different installations with hand sanitizer. And so I love the idea of like, we have the ability to kind of reduce the fear and to build trust with our clients, and we can do that in a creative way. And since we are all creatives, or most of us that are listening to this podcast, the thought of kind of combining those two things together and getting super creative with the ways that we kind of show up and kind of help people understand the expectations is really fun. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, that makes me think of the launch party when we had the bracelets with the different comfort levels, but the bracelets were so cute. They were like olive green, black, or like our suede brand color, and it's just like a fun way because everyone got to go home with a bracelet, but it also served a purpose. So just embracing the rules that maybe aren't so fun and make them fun.
Make them pretty.
I mean, as a creative, think outside the box and refer those ideas to your clients. They might run with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, what do y'all see that will be our clients and teams' biggest hurdles as we plan for events for 2022?
There's a lot. There's a lot. I think specifically just the unknowns that come with living in a world where we just don't know what's going to happen. And I don't think everyone realized that until a year ago. Has it been a year? Is it 2 years or a year?
It's like a year and a half.
2 years. Oh,
I don't know.
It's 5 years.
Feels like 5 years.
It's been 10. I
More
think,
than a year.
Yeah, okay. 2-ish.
Yeah.
Year and a half, 2 years, whatever. I feel like it kind of hit everyone. I'm like, you can't expect certain things, we just don't know. And so I think that's hard. I think it's hard specifically for us as someone who relies on the client to come in. We are not going out and planning certain events. I mean, we do that with our education side. But with clients coming in, we just don't know where they're at, and they don't know where they're at. And so I think that's going to be really hard for our clients, is just kind of gauging and just kind of being okay with not having 100% confidence in that their decision's going to happen. And I also think not knowing where attendees are at, or where they might not feel comfortable. And so again, just a lot of dealing with the unknowns and just kind of doing it, and just kind of pushing through and just saying, okay, we're gonna try this, and if we have to have a contingency plan, then we'll go with the contingency plan.
I think something that we definitely, so as you know, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, every December we plan for our next year of business, what we want it to look like, what we expect to happen. And I know last year, if you're anything like us, you probably thought, oh my gosh, 2021 is going to be the year for events. It's going to be, we thought 2020 was going to be that. Clearly it wasn't. So 2021 is going to be awesome. By March, we're going to be killing it. And by summer, it's going to be all open. And by fall, it's going to be our best season yet. And if you have been in the events industry for a minute, you will understand that that's not necessarily reality. And so certainly we had some fallback plans of, okay, if it doesn't end up this way, what are we going to do instead? Or how can we still maintain the revenue that we're expecting, maybe just in a different capacity? Something that we'll definitely implement into this year's planning for 2022 is having plans A, B, C, D, E, F, like so many different plans, because you can never rely on plans A, plans B, sometimes plan C. And so forward thinking, hey, what can we expect if our plan doesn't go as we are planning? As we all know, how can we still maintain what we need to maintain as a business? And so just thinking ahead, don't plan your next year like you may have planned last year, or even more so the year before. Just have some hesitancies and some different plans ahead.
Yeah, get creative. I think one thing that we've probably all felt this year is reduced budgets. That was something that we anticipated, but something that I didn't necessarily anticipate, that I think is happening now, but I think will continue to happen in 2022, is a lot of our corporate clients are relying on sponsorships. So with the brand activations, they are relying on this person to sponsor them at this X amount. And so they already know, okay, I can plan for my budget spend to be X because I'm getting X from them. Well, we are currently seeing a lot of sponsors pull out at the last minute. And so we're having corporate clients that are having to drop out of their contracts because what they expected is no longer in front of them. And so that wasn't something that I really was considering until it happened for the first time 2 weeks ago. I was like, oh, okay, so how do we work around this? And one workaround that I suggested was, okay, is there any wiggle room in the budget? Where can we get you to somewhere similar to where you wanted to be design-wise? That's a little bit more in your price range that you can front the cost for. Or how can we, maybe we start out small after we've pulled back, and then if you get another sponsor, we already have your date booked, we can really amp it up at that point, and we can get really creative. You also are probably, we have felt this for a while, but timelines are gone. They are gone. I am getting people
timelines for booking is what we're talking about.
That's what I'm talking about.
Timelines are still on as far as
event timelines. Yes, people are still using time.
Left.
Sometimes they're not. But for the booking, like the pre-booking and the process, it is like my event is next Tuesday and it is Thursday.
Or my event is today.
My event is today at 6 p.m. or my event is tomorrow. And when we transitioned to corporate, we were already accustomed to about 2 to 4 weeks.
Which is still a pretty short time frame.
It is a short time frame for sure. But now we're seeing like 5 days a day, 2 weeks. And so getting
like anywhere in between.
Getting really creative and like prioritizing what you need to prioritize, and then also feeling like knowing where you're at budget wise and knowing where you're at with influx like coming in, you can have confidence in saying we can't do that. We just can't accomplish the 6 hour event because we don't have staff, which is another thing that I think is going to be an issue is staffing, because we are seeing that. And I think everyone in the Dallas market, I know you were having conversations of it is just hard to get staff right now.
And the reason why that is because in 2020, a lot of us had to furlough staff, or we didn't have the hours to give some of the people who may not be as full-time. And so they either were collecting unemployment and didn't have to work because they were receiving government money, or they have found another job like an Amazon that pays a lot more because they have a much larger company, or they're going somewhere else and maybe they're not even in the events industry anymore. Maybe they've transitioned to something completely different than what they were doing before. And so staffing is going to be hard. You might have new staff that you have to hire on, and some of you might be blessed to have some of your old staff back to you. But finding quality staff that's going to stay with you for a long time is going to be a challenge because of the last year and a half of just change in general. People have been more intentional about what they want to do with their lives. They may not want to work part-time for your rental company. They might want to stay home, or they might want to go work for another corporate company. And so it's going to be a challenge. It's always been a challenge with staffing, but I think it's going to be even more of a challenge now that there is more options and there's more work from home options than there was pre-pandemic.
Yeah. I think also we've talked about hybrid a lot, but I think producing hybrid events is going to be a challenge in 2022 of just figuring out how to do that well, how to have the in-person component really nailed in, dialed in, and also the online presence, especially if your budget is tight and both are going to pull from your budget. And so how to do that really well I think is just going to be a challenge for people.
Okay, so the last question that I have is, what trends do we think are going to dominate events in 2022?
Okay, so this one I have just been processing a lot just based on events that we've been doing in the last 6 weeks. And hear me when I say this is kind of an element of brand activations. But I really, really feel like the brand activations are going to be a lot tighter and they're going to be a way more intimate. And so I think with having restrictions with capacity in some areas, and also just most activations, if it's a large company, go from major city to major city. And so they're going to be essentially creating this template of like, this is what I want the experience to feel like. And so if they were to come here in Dallas, obviously they could have a larger capacity. But if they were to go somewhere else like New York or LA or Canada, where it's 10 people, that's going to fluctuate. And so what I'm anticipating is we're going to see an influx in very, very curated activations that are like a complete build out of a space instead of just having like fun elements and Instagrammable moments. It's going to actually be like a very curated experience for a select group of people to really target their audience and to really kind of see more of a return on their investment for the activations. So that's what I'm anticipating.
Like for the specific city too, like based on their guidelines and stuff is what you're saying, rather than before you're saying there was a template.
Well, I'm saying that they're going to model, they're probably going to pick the tightest city, and that's what they're going to model so that they're not having to recreate different. It'll be much easier on the planning company, the DMC that's doing it, or the actual company that's doing the brand activations. That way they're not having to sit through like, okay, Dallas is going to be this and LA is going to be this. They're going to figure out the maximum that they can do in like the tightest of city, and that's what they're going to do. And they may be able to expand budget wise in like the bigger areas. But that's kind of what I'm anticipating, and I'm very excited about it.
I was going to say, one good thing for us, for rental companies, is if you really just go out there and give it your all and you kill it with a corporate event or a brand activation, they may want to take you along for the ride in other cities. We have had that. We have had one in particular that has wanted to take us to multiple cities within Texas because they loved working with us. So could really work to your advantage.
And one company saw that activation and they want to do this. Like another company came in and want to do the same thing. So if you nail one and you start getting it out there, then people are like, oh, yes, I want that.
Yeah.
And I want it like this, and I want it like this. So that's one thing that I'm kind of anticipating, and I'm very excited about it, like I said, because that's my favorite.
Inventory wise, I feel like I've seen a lot more quotes come through for like installations, whether it's a backdrop installation. We also do floral, so floral installations, something that what we would call as a moment of impact at the event. Whether it goes for wedding, social, corporate, they're looking for something that makes them different.
Yes.
Whether it's through colors, shapes, sizes, product, something that really stands out.
A lot of custom.
Yes.
People are wanting to customize like things that we have in our inventory that we normally don't customize. Like, how can I customize that?
Yeah. How can I make that different?
What can I do to that makes that different? How can I change the color of that sofa?
Right.
You can't. We can buy you a new one.
House upholsterer.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, we can't turn that, blue.
That's a little difficult.
Yeah.
I also think, again, the trend for next year is going to be very last minute and very quick turnaround times. I think you're going to have to figure out, if you haven't already figured out how to do that well, sit in these next couple of months and really figure that out, because I don't think that's going to go away.
Yeah.
And
meaning your logistics process, how do you get your staff scheduled real quick?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get your inventory loaded? If it's not cleaned already, how do you get it cleaned really quick? If you don't have trucks, or if you have trucks, how do you schedule those as quickly as possible? Like we said, we're getting certain quotes that are hours away, days away. It's rare that we're seeing like weeks or months away at this point.
Yeah, it's weird. Whenever I have a 6 month,
we're like, are you sure you meant,
like,
3
right
months from now,
date?
or are you really meaning like 3 weeks from now? So just understanding the logistics process so you can quote someone, but what are the steps that make that happen?
Yes,
after?
and that's going to set you up for success and really diversify you from your competition, because people are going to see that you are able to accomplish it, and they're going to be able to trust you. I keep saying trust and, all of that, but it's real. Like, I cannot tell you how many clients that we have just pulled together really quick, and they're like, I will never book with anyone else because I know that you can do it. And I try in that conversation to say, well, reach out a little bit ahead of time next time.
Maybe like a day before.
That would really be helpful. We can figure it out, but it'd be really helpful if you can't.
Yeah.
We also included about a year ago, 2 years ago, we have a last minute feed.
Quick turnaround.
Yeah, quick turnaround. And it's a percentage of the order. I believe it's 20% of the order. And that is for any project booked within 5 days, 5 business days. And so that helps also alleviate some of that internal tension of.
And it kind of teaches your clients, hey, if you book within these amount of days, you are going to expect a 20% fee next time. And so it might teach your client, hey, you reach out 6 days before.
Just make sure you book on the 6th day and not wait, because the next day you're going to get the quick turnaround fee. Yeah. Are there any other trends that you can think of?
Not that I can think of. I would just say get really used to those last minute orders. Figure out inventory-wise what you want to put in your inventory. I know that we've taught it on Rental Biz Academy, and we've taught it a couple times here. But reach out to some of the people who are reaching out to you and ask them what they want. Ask them what they're looking for. Ask your clients. Put it on your social media. Gathering that information from the people that book from you is going to be really helpful when choosing what you do want to offer next year.
Yeah, I have a running list of any time a client says something on our post survey or says something in our client conversations. It's like, oh, I really am looking for this. I have a running list of like, okay, whenever we're getting ready to buy, I know this has been asked 5 times. This is for sure something that we want to add. We are going to talk about this on another podcast episode coming soon, but something just to be putting on your radar, you're gonna want to increase prices.
Yes.
Like you were talking about with inflation of everything, it's so important that you are thinking through right now how you're going to increase prices to be profitable, but also to make you margin, to be able to kind of add a little bit of a safety net. So I am really looking forward to talking to you about that, because
October 13th.
Okay, get ready for October 13th. We are actually on Friday going through and are going to be increasing our prices. So
Fun time.
We're going to
Fun
teach you
time.
exactly how we're doing it right now, what we're looking at, what's trending, how we figure out what to raise it to. So come back in October.
Mhm.
All right.
I think
Well,
we're
this
good.
has been so fun talking about what we are seeing in the events world. Again, we are no expert on COVID. We're no expert on what is happening, but we can just tell you from our experience what our clients are doing and what you might be able to see happening in your city soon.
Thanks,
Bye, guys.
Bye. See you next week.